Okay, guys, I've got a short presentation. Try to break down extended range a little bit for you guys. Can everybody see that I'm sharing a presentation screen? I've got everybody muted for the most part. I think might be one or two that aren't, just to keep down noise for everybody else. And we'll still have questions and answers. I'll try to get everybody unmuted at some point to do that. And if you really need to get my attention, and I don't, just make a note. We'll come back to whatever it is. It's a real short number of slides, maybe about 14, 15 slides. We'll go through this as we're presenting extended range in a way that SSI offers it and the way Water E can offer. But as you'll see a little bit later, some options. So extended range dive and go farther, deeper, and beyond. So this is just the introduction to getting around the no decompression limits. And so what is extended range? Here's a picture here. Simplest terms, it is just diving beyond the no decompression limit. So everybody familiar with the amount of time you've got at your particular depths from dive tables. And of course, most everybody knows that computers allow you to extend that by calculating the tables on the fly so that you don't have to assume you're at the maximum. But that notwithstanding, you still have a limited time at any given depth, and you have to decompress after that. So what this set of courses does is introduce you to diving beyond those no decompression limits. For the first class we've got that most people would typically take, and there's a third one I'll talk about as well. We call it extended range nitrox diving, or you might see it labeled as XRN. And what that is allowing you to have that first introductory experience into extended range diving. And it allows, obviously, like everything else, it's a buddy sport, diving with an equally or greater qualified buddy. In the certified configuration, we'll talk a little bit more about configurations, but if you dive XR nitrox in a single back-mounted tank, then that's what this would certify you to do if you certify for the class. To depths up to 40 meters, okay? And up to 15 minutes of deco on your back gas profile. Now that sounds a little bit confusing, but what that means is basically no acceleration from your deco. So it's a safety. So let's say that I am coming back up after the end of my dive. I've reached my time limits. My plan is to come up and deco on a particular mix up to 50%. I switch over to what I think is my 50%, but it turns out I just put the back gas back in my mouth. I'm breathing the same air I've been breathing on the way down and on the way back up. Well, I planned all my numbers based on that. So I'm really no harm, no foul. It's a learning experience. It's a buffer. It's a little safety cushion. So if I forget to switch over my gas, I'm still learning, right? So if I forget to switch or something goes wrong with that switch, I've planned out my times, my deco times, to where I could do it all on the air that's in my back mounted tank, no problem. But you do want to switch over if you can, gain that advantage of the safer gas as you're decompressing, as far as getting rid of the nitrogen. So if I'm diving air on my back and I'm decoing on 50% oxygen, then the 50% is going to allow for quicker decompression, but that doesn't credit you on the time at this level. You can't credit the time, you're only crediting the safety margin, okay? So that's all in the planning. Extended range nitrox is not too extreme as far as the world of extended range diving, but it is that introduction. It doesn't require you to do a whole heck of a lot to get into it. There are some prerequisites. Minimum age for extended range nitrox is 16 years old. I think most everybody on here is older than that, so that's not a problem. And I've got one in the waiting room, I'll admit. You have to have at least 24 log dives. You have to have a deep diver certification, and you've had to have certified in nitrox level 2 or 40% nitrox. That comes from there being 2 levels of nitrox class. You could take the abbreviated up to 32% class, but most people don't offer that really. A watery always offers the 40%, as I understand it. So those are the prerequisites, not too hard to achieve there. There are some equipment requirements. Now in this class, you can typically dive your standard recreational gear. You need a complete single cylinder total diving system, right? So you basically have that when you have recreational gear. Now your BC needs to be able to take a smaller deco tank. So you need to have a proper D-ring, maybe up here on the chest, and another one at the hip, something to that effect, where you can strap off the deco tank, the deco cylinder, or the stage cylinder. All those words are interchangeable there for these purposes. So you'll need that plus your one stage cylinder. All right, so what is a stage cylinder? You might ask that. So typically, I carry a 40 cubic foot aluminum cylinder. It has its own dedicated regulator first stage and second stage. Right, it has some various clips and bands to make it nice and totable. Hooks to a D-ring on my chest and one onto my hip. Right, that is one stage cylinder. At this level, extended range nitrox diving, the maximum percent oxygen you're allowed to use is 50%. It doesn't mean you have to use 50%. So the limitation between 40 and 50 is oxygen clean. Up to 40, if you know your regulators, so you can use your regulators up to 40% just out of the box, right? Well, that's typical. If you want to go over 40, and with this class you can go up to 50, everything needs to be oxygen clean. And that's for safety, mainly for the purpose of the person filling the tank, and for your gear, so you don't start fires or anything like that. A lot of what we do in technical diving is partial pressure blending, where pure oxygen pure oxygen O2 is introduced into the tank before air is topped on it to make a lighter mix to whatever you want. So there's a safety concern there, as well as your gear wear. Everything needs to be clean because oxygen is an oxidizer. It tears things up pretty quick. We got another one waiting. Welcome, Michael. So those are the equipment requirements. Now we'll talk about some other requirements as well. These are just the ones that are in the standard. Then we move on to extended range diving. Now, extended range diving differs a little bit from extended range nitrox diving in that it's the next step, but you can start at this step. You don't have to take that preliminary step. So the XR nitrox class is not a prerequisite requirement for the extended range diving class. However, it does require a few other things. It allows for diving with an equally or greater qualified buddy, same as the other one, but you get 45 meters instead of 40 for your maximum depth. And you can do up to 25 minutes of accelerated deco on up to 100% oxygen, right? So if you're diving 100% oxygen on your deco, or even 80%, which is maybe easier to get than 100, sometimes if the pressure's not there, you have to have everything oxygen clean. So the equipment requirements are a little more strenuous. The prerequisites are minimum age of 18, at least 50 log dives, deep diver certification, and again with the nitrox level 2 or Nitrox 40 certification. The equipment requirements: a complete twin set total diving system, including a stage cylinder. This is where you go from ditching the recreational gear and moving into extended range dedicated gear. The twin set, you've seen that double back mounted tanks with a manifold between, with a back plate and a harness and a wing. And that's typically what we're talking about.
Sam, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What about single tank with H valves on it? Would that still meet the criteria for this stage?
You came in a little bit late, but not this stage. That's the previous XR Nitrox class. Right. So with the XR extended range Nitrox, you can use recreational gear. It simply needs to have a D-ring set up to where you can mount your deco tank or your stage bottle. But H valves are certainly welcome in that regard. There's a couple other minor things we'll talk about as well that are good to haves, but not necessarily required.
Okay, thanks.
So the equipment requirements for the extended range diving class are a little bit different in that you're starting with a twin set. Now, if you haven't dove a twin set system, what I find is once it's balanced and trimmed out and you've got through all of the getting it set up, it's actually easier to keep your trim in a twin set system than it is in a recreational single tank system. That's one of the things I like about it. It kind of keeps you level in a prone position as opposed to being upright. Right? And you can do it with a single tank as well. It just takes a little bit more trimming and balance on your weights to get it there. Let's see here. Next.
Now, Sam, can you teach the extended range stuff in side mount and only back mount?
Right now, we're only teaching it in back mount. However, and I was going to get to this, but let me go ahead and interject it here. There is a third class, and I'll get some confirmation from SSI on this. If I were to try to get you to certify for side mount diving extended range, I would have to, right now, the way it stands, I would have to have you take my extended range class, the way I can teach it in twin set. And then there's a third class called Foundations, Extended Range Foundations. Extended Range Foundations is all about the diving, the equipment, the teamwork building. It's not about actually going and do the deco dives. So you could do this, you could do a foundations class fairly shallow. You could do it probably in the pool and get away with everything that you need to do there. And then you would certify at whatever certification level you have at that point. Let's say you've already taken my extended range class in twin set. Then you would certify to dive side mount. Now, we're working on getting to that stage, and that's coming very, very soon. We'll be able to do that. I want to confirm that with our trainers, that would allow me to do. With the way I read the standards is that once I've got the side mount instructor rating for recreational and the fact that I'm an extended range instructor, I can then do the foundations class with side mount.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I can't do the extended range side mount class. It's a little strange. It seems like since I can do twin set, I should be able to do side mount, because if you think about it, actually some of the things are a little bit easier. But this is the way they've got the standard written right now, and I will be pursuing those next steps myself later. Probably won't be early this season, because it will take me the time to get with the proper trainers and things to do that. Like I said, there's the foundations class, so that could be our stopgap until we get the proper certifications to start out in side mount. And we are certainly working towards getting all the recreational side mount credentials as well.
Minute, so here I am.
Here you are. So that's the three classes, right? So we have extended range nitrox, it's kind of a introductory level, extended range, which gets you a little bit further, then foundations, which is gear maintenance and technique maintenance and teamwork building kind of class. And so the people that's designed for is people that want to be introduced to a new configuration of gear, or that want to brush up their skills that are already certified with extended range, but maybe it's been a few years, right? It's kind of like a refresher course for them. So that class can be done either way. All right, so beyond further training, beyond extended range, can get you to increase depths of 50 meters, 60 meters, 80 meters, 100 meters. Those are all different stages of classes. There's 50, 60, 80, 100. That would be technical extended range with not just one, but two stage bottles or more, and the introduction of possibly trimix. To get to the 100 meters, you're going to have both multiple bottles and trimix. Right? 100 meters, think about it, that's 330 feet, right? Not a lot of 330-foot dives locally, but they're around. Overhead environment. And that training includes various levels of cavern and cave diving, as well as, if that's not your cup of tea, wreck diving with various levels of penetration and depth, right? So you got the first level of wreck diving with penetration. It allows you to go into an area inside the wreck where you can always see the way out, right? That's the same as cavern. In a cavern, you can always see the way out. But then you also got the full penetration where you can't see the way out once you've gotten in so deep, right? So those different levels of classes exist as well. We don't teach every one of them, but I'm going to work towards being able to certify as many of them as I can. And of course, other gear configurations such as rebreathers, right? Closed circuit and semi-closed circuit rebreathers. Those are totally separated from the open circuit diving standards, because they're so technically oriented towards that particular rebreather, right?
Mushrooms.
So we talked a little bit about equipment. So let's go through a little bit more detail of that equipment list for extended range nitrox. That's that introductory course. Got some more people in the waiting room. So in the extended range nitrox class, these are the things you need, right? So you need a BC with inflator and D-rings appropriate for stage cylinders. So that just means your stage cylinders will hook on properly, not be so tight that it's killing you or anything like that, and can support the weight and everything. An air delivery system with a primary. Now you might already have that, but a 6-foot hose is recommended. It's not required, but it's recommended because that is an introduction to where it is required later on, right? The primary cylinder that you'd use for your back gas, you want it to be a bigger capacity if you can help it, because it's your only back gas cylinder. Gets you a little bit further. So I like to dive a steel 100. Some people like 120s. It's up to you. You could do it with a lower capacity tank, an 80, 85, etc. If you're going to dive, get used to diving with more air is what I say. All the cylinders have to have an SPG. Each cylinder needs to be you need to be able to read how much gas is in each cylinder, right? And you also need a timing device and depth gauge or dive computer. Now, as far as dive computers go, I really like the Shearwater dive computers, and that's what we're using. And that's what I'll be using. And if you were to take one of the classes, I would recommend something with that same algorithm. Shearwater is one of the better computers out there anyway, and that way we would match up on our algorithms. You need a mask, fins, appropriate exposure suit. Now we're diving locally for the most part. As much as we can, we're going to dive locally. So the idea there is we're going to be at depth longer. let's say even on the extended range nitrox class, and I'm down at, 40 meters for 20 minutes or so, it's going to get nice and cold. Right? Can I take that cold in a wetsuit? Sure, most of the time I can, but I'm going to be very uncomfortable. We're not in Southern Florida, so it can be kind of a problem. So that exposure suit is very important. So if I'm doing local diving here, as opposed to South Florida, if I go to South Florida and dive like out of Boca Raton or somewhere like that, I can be down at my maximum depth and be just comfortable because maybe it dropped 3 or 4 degrees from the surface temperature. So I'm still diving 80-degree water, thin wetsuit. But here we go to somewhere like Jocassee, it's going to be a lot colder. So I want to probably dive my dry suit if I can help it. I have done those types of dives in a wetsuit. They're not super comfortable, but that's at the extended range nitrox level, right? And it's doable, but I highly recommend an appropriate exposure suit, regardless of the conditions. A cutting device, you need to have a cutting device. Not anything wrong with having multiple. A reel or a spool appropriate for the maximum planned depth, and an SMB, and one surface signaling device in your logbook. Now, most people have those with as part of your recreational dive gear. If your BC doesn't really support the D-rings, maybe you've been diving a really lightweight BC, something like travel BC, then maybe you would need to look at something else for taking an extended range nitrox class in. And there are then various accessories that just make life easier. Since we do a lot of diving locally, when we go that deep, it gets kind of dark in our lakes. So appropriate lights, and then appropriate bolt snaps for those dive lights so we can clip them off to D-rings where we need them, and that kind of thing. Like a large double snap just to use as a crank for my SMB line. And it serves a bunch of purposes. It's always one way or another. I'm going to be using that during the dive. Sharpie markers, white duct tape, calculator. Those things are kind of handy when we're planning out the dives. We want to mark our cylinders. There's some details we'll go over in class. But if you're going to have those things, if you're going to do that type of dive and you want to be able to do it properly, you'd have, mark your tanks appropriately with nice visible lettering that says what's in it. Calculator, we're going to have to do some math. Unfortunately, it's not difficult math. That's good, but I usually can't do all of it in my head real quick. So we'll use a calculator. And then there's dive planning software. Now, those things you don't have to have for doing the class, as far as especially the dive planning software, because I'll have a copy of it. But short of relying on your, say, my Shearwater computer, it's not really the best planning computer. It does some planning mode in it, and I can get some information. But when we plan for these dives, XR nitrox dives, you would see this in the class if you take it. We plan to the nth degree all the gas we're going to use at given depths. So when we're at our deepest depth, we know exactly how much gas we're going to use at that depth. We're even going to know how much gas we use traveling back up to our first eco stop. All that's mapped out. So we take a little bit of time to do that dive planning. And it helps to have some dive planning software and know things like your breathing rate, right? And those are things we work on as part of the class. Now the XR extended range equipment list, a little bit more intense. Minimum twin set total diving system, which is usually made up of a back plate. It can be a soft pack if that's what you have, but it has to have a harness, buoyancy wing with appropriate lift right? Remember, you're lifting double tanks. Now, you can dive lighter tanks or heavier tanks, so it just has to have appropriate lift for whatever you're diving. Delivery system, your regulator hose needs to be your typical 5 or 6 foot hose. Shorter folks will probably lean towards a 5 foot hose, but the standard is a 6 foot hose, and everything is in metric. That's just SSI, everything's in metric now. One delivery system that has a regulator with a neck retainer and an attached SPG. Now that 50 to 75 centimeters, that's a short hose that comes from your regulator and sits basically under your neck. This is where your backup regulator will sit. Right, that's for yourself, because it's going to be on a necklace. You're not going to hand that off. You're going to hand off the primary. That's extended range diving. One set of double cylinders with an isolation manifold. Right, those can be steel cylinders. They can be aluminum cylinders. If you want the capacity, you go with the, let's say, double hundreds. If you want lightweight, you go with aluminum 80s. You still got 160, total. So you can definitely do aluminum 80s if you want. 2 integrated depth and timing devices. So I said 2. So if one is a depth and timing device, I'd be surprised because everybody uses computers. So you're typically going to have 2 computers. You have a stage cylinder with a delivery system, and your stage cylinders will have it's roughly a 40-inch. I know they put everything in metric here. It's about a 40-inch hose. It's long enough to go from your left side, behind your head, and around to your mouth. That's what it's designed to do. You want to still be able to turn your head, right? So it's about 40 inches. Every tank that you have has to have a way to read how much pressure's in it. So SPGs all around. 2 masks. So you're not just diving with 1 mask anymore. Fins, exposure suit appropriate for the environment. And then, of course, what do you do with that extra mask? You got to have a pocket or something to put it in, wherever you're going to store it. That's typical. 2 cutting devices. Navigation may be necessary. You're going to have a compass. 2 signaling devices for deploying from depth. Could be red. They could, the colors of them will be dependent upon your local guidelines. You need a reel or a spool appropriate for the maximum planned depth. 1 surface signaling device, and the dive planning sheets you get in the class. Wet notes are a slate, so you can write down your plan and take it underwater with you, and backup plans and things like that, and a logbook. Those are the things that are required. Notice this list took up 2 columns here on my presentation, and that's just the one. That's just the required stuff, and I haven't even got to the extra stuff yet. And just like the other class, the extended range nitrox class, there are various accessories that just make life easier, like bolt snaps, double snaps, Sharpie markers, duct tape, calculators. And when you're getting into doubles, I love to have my foldable dolly cart, right? Something I can throw in the back of the truck, but I can wheel around my double tanks without having to hoist them up on my shoulder or something, or drag them around the parking lot. Okay, so there are some other considerations for class, right? If you're going to take an extended range course, whether it's extended range nitrox or extended range, or the foundations class for that matter, fitness can be a consideration. There's a little more physicality involved with extended range courses. Not that every dive that you'll ever do is going to be strenuous, but some of the requirements for the course are a little bit more strenuous than things are for typical open water courses. There's a swim evaluation, which is not too terrible, but you do it in all of your gear, right? You're swimming with, if you're in doubles, you're swimming with doubles on your back and your deco bottle on your side. It's a lot of drag. And if you're in a dry suit, you're swimming with the dry suit on as well. There's a timed rescue where both the rescuer and the rescuee are in their full gear, and it's time. You got to get them out of the gear. So it's not anything to be scared of. If you've had stress and rescue, then it's very, very similar to that. Only there's a little bit more unclipping and things like that to do. And of course, there's more drag on everything, right? But the trick to that is, even though it's timed, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So slow movements and thinking about one step at a time gets you actually finished faster. My personal recommendation is if you haven't had stress and rescue course, that is a good one to have as kind of a preliminary course for this. The other thing is the environment. So we'll be attempting to make as many classes as we can local. So we have all our checkout dives locally. But some local travel may mean traveling to Lake Jocassee, for example, right? Just for ease of entry and ease of getting to the depths that we need to get to. And those depths locally, again, I'll restate this, means that the water's typically pretty cold. Now, in the extended range course, if we're going to be at 149 feet for 25 minutes, and our total dive time is going to be a little over an hour, say an hour and 10 minutes, we're going to need proper thermal protection. And for me, I'm going to definitely do a dry suit. Now, if you're doing a dry suit for the class, if you have a dry suit certification, wonderful. If you don't have a dry suit certification, you would just need to, before the class starts, and this could be in the pool or whatnot, we need to see that you have familiarity with your dry suit and basically just convince the instructor that everything's going to be okay there. And it gives an opportunity to say, well, let's get a little more work on your dry suit diving before we jump into the class, right? And that's a good way to just be clear on it is get yourself a dry suit and sign up for a dry suit class if that's a question. So if you have any questions about the fitness evaluation, this is it. It's not too terrible. It's basically what I described before, but you are doing the surface swim with a total diving system. You need to be able to swim the length of our typical pool underwater using the mast fins and snorkel, which is not too terrible. You can do a couple of workup breaths before you get going, and you can make it across the pool pretty easy on that. Swim horizontally. I don't typically do option 2 just because I don't like people holding their breath underwater. I typically do option 1. And to be honest with you, it's a little easier anyway than having to deal with all the gear. And then the dive or rescue, 300 feet is the distance we have to travel, and the time limit is 8 minutes. And I will definitely help you guys in understanding, hey, slow down your movements. You got plenty of time. You know, if I'm timing you, I'll definitely say you're doing good. You're on track. Don't get yourself too rushed. Doing fine. But like I said before, the reason I post this up here and tell you guys about that, especially like I find this with myself. I've been working remotely from home for almost a year now, and find my endurance for just walking up the street with the dog is not like what it used to be. So I need to also get myself back in a little bit better shape, right? I'm not real concerned over it, but it's just one of those concerns you want to be clear on that you've got it covered. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in.
Okay. I was saying, you mentioned a dive planning software. Do you have any recommendations so I can look at it?
Yeah, I can send out some recommendations. I want to make sure that I tell you the right version of what I've got. But
Actually, I was gonna ask about that too. Are you still using V Planner like you used in the class a year ago?
I'm trying to migrate away from V Planner. Yeah, V Planner doesn't V Planner doesn't do the same algorithms, so I'm trying to move to a different one, but it works the same way. And I can get you the name of that. I just, for some reason, I don't remember the name of the one that's preferred on the top of my head. I've used it a couple times in the trial mode, and it seemed to work the same as V Planner.
And it works pretty good with the Perdix, because I got the same.
Yeah,
thing.
it has this. The thing is, it has the same algorithm as the Perdix and the Shearwater algorithm, where the V Planner doesn't have that same algorithm. So what I generally experience is my V Planner plan differs from the Shearwater algorithm, just some minor differences, but it's not so much that I haven't just been able to work around it, but I really need to go ahead and purchase that other software. I think it's even by the same company. It's just a different software with a different algorithm.
And if I remember right, the V Planner really wasn't that expensive. I mean, it was.
No. And it's like lifetime. They keep up with the licenses and whatnot. So you got to, make sure to register it, but that's it.
Yeah, V Planner is $45 a year for the app.
Okay. Any other questions?
Rather than a new Shearwater computer, is the D6 sufficient?
It is, but it won't have the algorithms that I'll be using. And we can do our best matching with between the die plan software and our die plan sheets. If somebody has different equipment, or even if someone everybody's diving steel 100 doubles, but one person's got steel 80 doubles or aluminum 80 doubles. Well, then we just adjust to the lowest, the first turnaround time pressure. Now, obviously, that's probably going to be the guy with the twin 80s, if everybody else has got twin 100s. Right. Same thing if we get our deco fills and everybody's got 80% in their deco bottle, but one person in the class had 70% for some reason, well, then we got to base our plan on the 70%. Right? So that means everybody's going to hang together in our deco the same amount of time. This is one of the things I wanted to bring up too. What I said before is that just like regular diving, it's a buddy sport. But now when you go into extended range diving, it's a team sport. So you don't, if you've got two buddy teams, they're part of a team, a whole team of, let's say, 4 people. You're going to do all your planning together. You're going to stay together, and you're going to ascend together. Which means you're going to do your deco stops together, right? Now you could break up on your way up. You could break up, 2 people go on a different route or what have you. It's all got to be planned out, but it's a team effort, right? So, but your typical dive, especially with the class now, because your instructor is going to have to wrangle everyone together and come up together. Everybody's going to be coming up together. So there would be, if the class were full, the ratios are small for extended range. So it'd be 5 people, possibly 6 if I have an assistant, right? So the ratio instructor to student is 4 to 1. So I can have 4 students in a class. Now, if I have to do, and that's in the water, right? So we can have a bigger academic class. We can have a classroom class that's bigger, but when we get in the water, it's 4 to 1. So, if I have 8 people interested, that's going to be obviously 2 classes. So whether it's extended range nitrox, and I'm not going to mix up extended range and extended range nitrox, but the dives required for the classes For extended range nitrox, there are 4 open water dives for certification. And for extended range, there are 6. The first 4 being the same as the previous class, right? So, you know, the same skills, you're in a twin set instead of a single tank for recreational use.
Hey, Sam,
Yes.
have you mentioned the schedule yet when you're thinking about doing this class?
The schedule is going to be dependent upon a couple of factors: interest and pool and temperature, right? Pool access, we're going to, you know, like every other class, we pretty much do, we're going to do some training at the pool. When the pool opens up, we'll be able to use the pool. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to open just yet. I think Andy's working that out. And then, you know, temperatures and access to our local sites. I wouldn't want to do anything right now to, you know, like this week, shock the crap out of everybody with the cold water. Wait till it warms up a little bit at least. And we're starting to see that. The temperatures were kind of nice today. I like that. So that's a good sign. By the time, if we were to start a class this week course, we don't have to do everything in one weekend or in 1 week. We take our times, do our academics, get everybody in a pool, get the skills polished up really good. Perhaps somebody has to get a dry suit certification, get familiar with the dry suit, things like that. So there's some things that there's some potential for people to take a little bit of time right now in the initial stages. And that's why we're bringing this Zoom meeting out early in the season so that people do have time to do things like think about the extra gear that's required, the time it's going to take, et cetera. So there are academics, 80% on the test is required. There's pool session. There's 6 open water dives for extended range, 4 for extended range nitrox. And of course, there's no promise that each of those, there's no promise that it doesn't take you extra dives, right? Just because there's 6 required, or you have to make 6 to the instructor's satisfaction. So if we do a dive, let's say, and this is your 6th dive, you're almost there for certification, but we really royally screw something up, whether it's environmental or somebody did something that they weren't supposed to do, or we had just anything that signaled, hey, we have to abort this dive. Well, then we're going to have to make it up somewhere, right? So you have to pass the skills, you have to complete the dive, get it all logged properly, and we can never really promise that things are going to sail smoothly. So there's always a potential to have to do more than 6. It also will depend a little bit on scheduling, like I said, at those local sites. If we go to Jocassee, I would like to charter the pontoon boat up there, get across over to the wall, makes for an easy dive to depth. And that will depend upon their schedule. Right? So charter schedules could be part of the getting everything scheduled out. So I would hope to have a couple of classes in each one of these areas this year. And like I said, there's some folks that will need some time to put together some gear. So I'm not just going to immediately run to get a class going. You know, like right now, we got to do it right now. And that's going to be your only chance. No, that's not going to be the case. If we've got enough interest, we can go ahead and start some academics and things like that, then we'll get started and do things as early as we can. But that doesn't mean the opportunity won't present itself later on in the season. That's what part of this meeting was about. Let you guys know some of the requirements. Some folks would look at it and go, wow, it's a little bit of sticker shock on everything that I've got to get, you know, because I don't even have a BC right now. I've been renting one, things like that. So to jump straight into full technical gear, that's kind of a big initial expense, right? So if you've already got that, great. If you don't, it's something to work up towards, prepare for the classes that you want to take. And think about that. Like I said, again, we're also not in South Florida, so dry suits are almost a must here when we're talking about the depths and times at those depths. You may have taken a deep dive at Lake Jocassee or at Lake Thurmond somewhere, and it was cold for a little bit, and you came up, and you're like, oh, that was doable. I was able to do that in my wetsuit, but boy, that was cold. But the thing is, if we're down at 140 feet or so for 25 minutes, that's a lot more than you're used to. Even if you've dipped down to your maximum depths in some of those cold environments and then came back up under no decompression time limits, right? So our time limits are greatly expanded. How long will our thermal protection last until we're just too cold to do it? I know some of you guys do have dry suits. I will be certainly wearing mine, and possibly even looking at a different one, because there's some features that I like on some of the new stuff that's coming out. If you haven't seen a couple of folks at the dive shop, Mel and Matt, I believe, just got in some new DUI suits. Those suits are really nice. But we also carry whites, regulators, Scuba Pro, and Apex. Apex is really easy, really good stuff. That's what all the tech divers in Great Britain, where they're made, use. Scuba Pro is also really good, and I have a lot of Scuba Pro gear. As far as backplate and wings, again, Apex is a good brand. And Andy at the shop can help you configure your gear. He's got things like flashlights and all the accessories and things that you need as well. So we can definitely get you squared away with gear that's required. Anybody have any?
Somebody that's got like a Ranger BC, they'll be fine for the first course, right? With the Ranger BC, because they got points.
Yeah, as long as the clips will go on the D-rings, should be fine.
Okay, and even the Apex soft pack, where it's the Apex rig, but it's not got the back plate, they would still be fine, right? Because it's got the clips.
Yeah, you don't have to have a hard mounting plate. It can be a soft pack. Like I've got one harness that I use, an Apex harness. It's real nice and cushy, shoulder padded and everything, and it's got a soft pack. I can actually attach doubles to it.
Okay.
Even though it's a soft pack, right? So I'm not necessarily going to put the Steel Hundreds on there if I can help it, without putting a plate in it. But it can certainly take
But
double.
Very first course. Now I did it with a single tank with H valves.
Right.
I've had people ask me, the very first one, you can still do that one with not totally all the tech gear, right? You just got to have something you can put a pony bottle on. Is that right? Still?
Yeah, your first course, I would recommend, if you're going to get a deco bottle, go ahead and get a 40 cubic foot bottle as opposed to say like a 30. There's always room for a 40 as you progress on, or even if you regress back and want to use the 40 just as an emergency bailout for wreck diving or something, for regular diving. 40 is nice that it will do both jobs. It'll get you there for both jobs. If I dive a deco dive on a 40, I can usually get 2 dives out of that deco bottle before I have to refill it. Same with my Steel Hundreds. I can usually get 2 dives out of the Steel Hundreds without having to refill. And I do have to plan everything out, make sure that it's going to happen that way before I do it. But that's typical.
Yeah, and I know I may have missed some at the beginning, but when I did it, we got the 2 car, we got the foundation and the other, but they really hadn't split it out. Are you going to be doing the foundations with equipment configuration with that? I say that just because we're talking some about equipment. Before you do the first class, so that somebody that's really just starting off in this and is trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, if somebody needs a gear introduction, right? Let's say they're going to dive twin set and they've never dove twin set before. I could certainly put on a foundations classes. It's kind of like a workshop, help you get your buoyancy and trim right with your gear. That, like I said before, though, that class can also be used as a refresher for people that have already had experience with extended range diving, but maybe they're changing their gear configuration.
Oh, that's why I liked it when we did, because I wanted, that was a piece I wanted. No, I'm sort of asking mainly for somebody that's got a semi-technical BC already. And so they got that, they got the nice regs that are going to fit. They may have a 6-foot hose, but they only have the single tank. I guess that's what I'm sort of asking about.
Yeah, a single tank with the regular valve is fine for the extended range nitrox class. Really, the only caveat with your BC, it needs to be able to support the deco bottle, and you of course need the deco bottle itself.
So something like a Ranger is going to fit the bill.
A Ranger should work fine. There are other BCs that have a nice solid D-ring on the chest and one on the hip. All of those would pretty much cover the need there. So you don't have to have a lot of equipment to get started, but you do have to have that stage bottle, which would require,
Gotcha.
which would, if you're going to go over 40%. Now remember, you can go up to 50% oxygen, but you don't have to. If you limit it to 40, you don't have to have anything O2 clean, but you're limiting yourself to 40% oxygen, right? Which we can certainly do even as part of the class if not everybody has all their stuff O2 clean. And the thing about O2 clean is that's an ongoing thing. You have to do it routinely, just like servicing your regulators. Things eventually do get dirty again, and you don't want any contaminants introduced with oxygen. So keeping that O2 clean status is very, very important if you go over 40%. And so like I said, extended range nitrox up to 50%, extended range up to 100% oxygen. And that's where you do an accelerated deco. You get the benefit of that speedy decompression on the higher percentage of oxygen. You don't get that benefit of accelerated time with the extended range nitrox. We just use that as a safety margin instead, right? So if you fail to switch over to your deco gas for the extended range nitrox, you're still fine because you planned everything, your times, all based upon what's in your main tank. So if you screwed that up for some reason, you're still okay. You're not gonna potentially hurt yourself just from that.
Hey, Sam, I've got a quick question. That breathing at 50% during deco, are you talking about at 15 feet or 20 feet?
At the limits of the gas, right? So yes, if we were diving 100% oxygen, we couldn't be any deeper than 20 feet. That's why I like to back off from that so that we can get deco depths of 40 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet, and then come up. So 80%, something like that for typical training that you may do once you get familiar with it. Squeeze on up to 100%, but you have to really have your buoyancy right, because when you're at 20 feet, there's not a lot of room for error, right? With the 50%, you can actually start breathing 50% at about 74 feet, I believe it is. Have to do the math. So you're well within, safe zone before you would start to do your deco on 50%. Unless you're really trying to maximize it and you'd switch over at 70 feet. I mean, which you could technically do. But we probably wouldn't do that for the class. Take you up to 40, do a few minutes according to our dive plan, take you to 30, do a few minutes according to our dive plan, take you to 20. Now, do you have to do that on every dive? No, you could have all your deco, like we used to do it at 10 feet, right? But, as part of the training, we're all about repetition. So having more stops allows you to communicate with your team members and do those things more times per dive, which is very important in your training. Any other questions? I know some people came in late, and we did cover a little slideshow. So if you have any particular questions, we did cover basics of what each of the class levels are: extended range nitrox, extended range, different gear configurations, some things beyond that, and extended range foundations.
So the extended range goes down to 180 feet.
Extended range for SSI's purposes takes you to 45 meters. So it's about 149 feet. Now,
Okay.
if we were to do it with trimix, we get a little deeper than that. But we have to get into technical, what they call technical extended range, to get into the 180 foot area. That's a little bit of confusion if someone's familiar with some of the other agencies' nomenclature or titles of classes. This is very specific to SSI. An extended range class in another agency may be a deeper certification.
You know, Sam, you mentioned different agencies right there. Entering into this, somebody coming from another agency, as long as they got, you said they got 50 dives and they're got their deep cert, they're fine entering into this, right? And you'll talk with them in advance to be
At
sure.
whatever level they're at, if we can, if they're an open water diver, certified with PADI or another agency, that's fine. It's not a problem. Still have to meet the prerequisite criteria. If they, for instance, already met a prerequisite for extended range diving, let's say they wanted to take the technical extended range diving course, and they were already what's equivalent to an XR nitrox diver with another agency, there's an equivalency chart, right? So you could look at the other agency column and say, okay, well, you have this certification that equals SSI's this certification. So that tells us where they're at. And then of course we can go from there. So it doesn't really matter what agency you've been working with. There's interoperations between all the agencies pretty much.
And you know about all that, what everybody else is doing, you're going to make it easy for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Now SSI's class, their structure for extended range is a little different than, let's say, IATD. The extended range nitrox class and the extended range class falls about, in between two of their classes, right? So
Yeah.
there's kind of a distinct difference in where you're at by the time you finish one of the courses. Any other questions? All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys coming to join us here. If you chimed in late, certainly, if you think of any questions, let me see if I can do this here. I haven't done this one. I want to share something with you guys. All right, so, oh boy, I can't type on. Can I type on
You
this?
can do this for a flip, man.
Very good. I can't write with that. Sam Templeton's my name. Sam at csgtec.com. Obviously, you can also contact the Dive Center at Watery at scuba.com. You might have to leave me a message. I don't answer every call if I don't recognize it right away, especially when I'm busy with some other things, because I get a lot of junk calls. We're trying to contact you about your car warranty. Get that one a lot. All right, any other questions?
I guess there's a lot of theory as far as oxygen load and all kinds of parameters there to dive right. If you do the repetitive dives, you're going to do a lot of calculations and table work too.
Yeah. As part of the classes, we do calculate all that out, and we keep you within a margin for oxygen exposure.
Right.
That's also why we can only do a certain number of dives per day.
Right.
So it must be spread out over multiple days because we don't want anybody, getting too close to oxygen toxicity exposure.
Right.